She told me she loved me, and I believed her, until the day she packed her bags and walked out, leaving nothing behind but a note and the faint scent of her favorite perfume. She walked out on a Tuesday, the kind of day that pretends to be ordinary. Sunlight filtered through the blinds. The coffee pot gurgled like always. I was late for work, fumbling with my tie, unaware my world was seconds from collapse. Her suitcase waited by the door. At first I thought she was visiting her sister, or going on one of those spontaneous trips she always talked about but never took. It didn't occur to me that this wasn't temporary, not until I noticed the way she avoided my eyes and the faint shake of her hands as she clutched the handle. She said she needed something I couldn't give her. Those words landed like a punch to the stomach. I was blindsided, gasping for breath as she listed my supposed shortcomings like a grocery receipt. No ambition, no fire, no future. Each accusation chipped away at my dignity until I was left standing there, hollow and raw. The note she left felt like salt in the wound, a few scrawled lines about how I was a good man, but not enough. Not enough for her dreams, her life, her endless hunger for more. I read it over and over, trying to decipher the woman I thought I knew. In the days that followed, I replayed every moment of our marriage, the little arguments, the times she sighed when I talked about my business, the way she stopped saying we and started talking about what she wanted. It was there all along, wasn't it? The signs, her growing restlessness, the subtle disdain. I didn't see it because I didn't want to. Friends tried to console me, though I could hear the whispers behind their sympathy. Poor guy, left for someone richer. A real-life cliché. Her new man was everything I wasn't, wealthy, charming, and flashy. He paraded her around like a trophy, and she looked radiant in every photo they shared. Still, I couldn't hate her, not yet. Instead, I blamed myself. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I got too comfortable. Maybe if I had been more ambitious or paid more attention, she would have stayed. I moved through my days like a ghost, haunted by the echo of her absence. Our home became a museum of broken promises. Her perfume lingered in the bedroom. The coffee mug she always used sat on the counter, mocking me. Nights were the worst. Sleep was a distant memory, replaced by a constant loop of what-ifs. The silence screamed, and the darkness pressed heavy against my chest. But even in the haze of heartbreak, a part of me knew this wasn't just about money. It was about her insatiable need to climb higher, to be envied, to escape a life she deemed too small. She left for a promise of more, and I was left behind, clutching the pieces of what we once were, trying to understand how love could unravel so easily. She thought she broke me, but pain has a way of turning into something far more dangerous. Resolve. In the days after she left, I was a man on autopilot. Work became my anchor, the only thing that kept me tethered to reality. At first, I showed up just to avoid the crushing emptiness at home, but slowly, something shifted. The pitying glances from coworkers stung less. The mundane tasks I once dreaded became small victories. Each success, no matter how minor, felt like a step toward reclaiming myself. The nights were still brutal, though. I would stare at the ceiling, haunted by the silence that had replaced her laughter. Every corner of the house whispered her absence. Her favorite blanket stayed draped over the couch, untouched. I told myself I'd get rid of it, but I couldn't. Not yet. My friends rallied around me, their concern equal parts comforting and suffocating. They dragged me out for beers and bad advice. Focus on yourself, they'd say. She's not worth it. Easy words for them to throw around, but it didn't stop the ache in my chest or the memories that surfaced at the worst moments. I hated her and missed her all at once. Then one morning, I saw a photo of her and Mark. It was plastered all over social media. A sun-soaked vacation, the two of them posed on a yacht. Her smile was wide, but there was something off about it, like it didn't quite reach her eyes. He looked smug, as if he'd conquered the world. It gutted me, but beneath the pain, anger started to burn. Not the kind of anger that destroys, but the kind that fuels. She chose him over me, fine, but I wasn't going to let her choice define me. I threw myself into my work like a man possessed. Late nights and early mornings blurred together, but with each passing day, my business grew. New clients, bigger contracts, the kind of success that made people take notice. I started going to the gym again, too. At first, it was just to burn off the restless energy, But as the weeks turned into months, I began to see a version of myself I hadn't recognized in years. Stronger, sharper. Someone who could look in the mirror without flinching. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. Then, one day, I bumped into an old friend who hadn't seen me since the split. He stared at me, wide-eyed, and said, "You're doing better without her, aren't you?" It hit me like a revelation. I was. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. It wasn't just about proving her wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. Mark's name started popping up in conversations, whispers about his business hitting rough waters. I tried not to care, told myself it didn't matter. But deep down, I couldn't help but wonder how long her new life would last. For the first time, I wasn't chasing closure or revenge. I was chasing something far more important, my own future. And for the first time, I believed I could actually catch it. They say karma is patient. It waits until you've climbed to the highest peak before yanking the ground from under your feet. The first whispers came from mutual acquaintances. Mark's business, once the golden beacon of his social status, was crumbling under the weight of bad investments and worse decisions. A risky deal gone south. A lawsuit that hit harder than expected. Suppliers pulling out. Creditors circling like vultures. I pretended I didn't care. But I watched. Social media told the story she wouldn't. The photos of her lavish life grew sparse, and the captions became conspicuously vague. No more yachts or designer vacations. No more glittering parties where they were the center of attention. Instead, there were candid shots of sunsets, lonely landscapes, and carefully worded posts about new beginnings. It wasn't hard to read between the lines. I pictured her pacing the halls of their oversized house, the one she'd flaunted like a trophy, while Mark yelled into his phone trying to save a sinking ship. I wondered if she regretted leaving me, or if she was too busy scrambling to hold on to the life she thought she deserved. Then came the email. It was short, polite, and painfully formal. She said she hoped I was doing well, and mentioned she'd heard about my business thriving. The tone was casual, but I knew better. This wasn't a friendly check-in. It was a fishing line cast into the waters of our shared past, testing if I might bite. I didn't respond. More updates trickled in over the following weeks. Mark had laid off staff, sold one of their properties. There were rumors of an impending bankruptcy. It didn't surprise me. Men like him build empires out of arrogance and ego, and when they fall, they take everything down with them, including the people who trust them. A friend of mine ran into her at a charity event. He said she looked thinner, her once vibrant confidence muted into something quieter, almost desperate. She asked about me, whether I was dating, how my business was doing, if I was happy. Happy? I thought, laughing bitterly when I heard the story. I didn't know if I was happy, but I knew I was free. Still, part of me felt a pang of something uncomfortably close to pity. Not for her exactly, but for the version of her I used to love. The woman who once shared her dreams with me, before those dreams became gilded with greed and envy. Mark's downfall became the talk of the town. He'd burned too many bridges, lied to too many people. The rich and powerful abandoned him like rats from a sinking ship. The final blow came when their mansion went on the market, an unspoken admission that their fairy tale had ended. I imagined her packing up that house, the one she chose over me. The empty rooms, the fading echoes of parties meant to impress people who no longer cared. I wondered if she thought about me as she boxed up her designer shoes and cocktail dresses, or if she still believed she could outrun the wreckage. I didn't reach out. She made her choices, and now she was living the consequences. Karma doesn't wait for applause. It doesn't need validation. It simply balances the scales, quiet and unrelenting. And I was finally beginning to see that some weights aren't mine to carry anymore. When she knocked on my door, she looked nothing like the woman I married. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the desperation in her eyes. I almost didn't recognize her. There was no sparkle, no confidence, no trace of the woman who once left with her head held high, clutching dreams of a richer, grander life. Now, she stood in front of me like a shadow of herself, clutching her purse as if it held the last scraps of her dignity. Her words tumbled out in a rush, apologies and justifications tangled in a mess of excuses. She didn't even wait for me to invite her in. She just started talking, as if silence might crush her completely. She said she'd made a mistake, that she'd let herself get swept up in the allure of something that wasn't real. Mark had promised her the world, and for a while, it felt like he'd delivered. But when the money disappeared, so did he. I stood there, stunned, as she spilled it all. The debt, the fights, the nights spent alone in a house that echoed with emptiness. How Mark blamed her for his failures. How he became cruel when his empire crumbled. She painted herself as the victim, a passenger on a ship she hadn't realized was sinking. It was almost impressive, the way she tried to rewrite history. She talked about our marriage like it had been perfect, as though she hadn't been the one to break it. She said she missed me, missed the life we had built together. Her voice cracked when she admitted she'd been watching me from a distance, seeing how I'd grown, how I'd thrived without her. She said it made her realize how much she had lost, how wrong she'd been to leave. It was surreal hearing her say the words I'd once begged for. Back then, I would have given anything to hear her admit she was wrong. But now, all I felt was the weight of her audacity. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. I just stood there, arms crossed as she unraveled. She was waiting for me to save her, to offer her the lifeline she had thrown away. I thought about the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong. The mornings I forced myself out of bed, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild the life she destroyed. The moments of doubt, the pain, the anger, and I thought about how far I'd come since then. When she finally stopped, her eyes searched mine, desperate for something I didn't owe her anymore. Forgiveness, redemption, a chance. I wanted to feel triumphant. I wanted to see her suffering as proof that I had won. But all I felt was a quiet clarity, a sense of closure I hadn't expected. I told her she was right about one thing. I had grown, but it wasn't for her. It wasn't because of her. It was despite her. Her face fell, and for a moment, I almost faltered. Almost. She stood there a little longer, waiting for me to say more, to give her something. But there was nothing left to give. As I closed the door, I felt a strange sense of peace. She had come crawling back, just like I knew she would. But I wasn't the man she left behind anymore. I wasn't hers to reclaim. And for the first time, I truly felt free. I let her finish her story, and for the first time, I truly saw her. Not the woman I loved, but the one who left me. Her desperate knock had been the last echo of her old confidence, and now the truth of who she was stood in its place. A woman who believed the world owed her more, who traded love for status, and then realized too late that she'd gambled away everything that mattered. I stood at the closed door for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the weight of her visit settle over me. I didn't feel the anger I expected. There was no satisfaction, no triumph in watching her unravel. There was only a profound sense of release. The past had come back to face me, but it no longer held power over me. That night, I sat with a glass of whiskey, replaying the words she'd said, her apologies, her regrets, her pleas for a second chance. Once, I might have taken her back. Once, I would have believed her tears and promises to change. But time has a way of revealing things. Her regret wasn't rooted in love or a realization of my worth. It was born of desperation, a last-ditch effort to escape the consequences of her choices. She didn't come back because she wanted me. She came back because she had nowhere else to go. And that wasn't enough for me anymore. I thought of the life I had built since she left, the business that was thriving, the friendships I'd deepened, the quiet joy of mornings spent in my own company. I thought of the woman I'd started seeing, a kind, grounded person who valued me not for what I could give her, but for who I was. I realized I didn't need her validation anymore. She called the next day, her voice tentative, almost pleading. She wanted to talk again, to explain herself further. I didn't answer. I let the call go to voicemail, then deleted it without listening. For weeks after, she lingered at the edges of my life. A message here, a mutual friend there. I could sense her trying to keep a foothold, hoping I'd soften, that I'd let her back in. But every attempt only confirmed what I already knew. Her time in my life was over. One evening, while walking through the park, I saw her sitting on a bench. She looked lost, staring at the ground with the kind of expression that could have been mistaken for reflection. But I knew better. She wasn't reflecting. She was regretting. And regret has a way of trapping people in the past. I walked past her without a word, my steps light, my head high. It wasn't about punishment or revenge anymore. It was about freedom. By the time I got home, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't holding on to the what-ifs or the could-have-beens. I wasn't haunted by the loss of her or the life we'd planned together. I poured myself another glass of whiskey and sat by the window, watching the last light of the day fade. There was peace in the quiet, not the suffocating silence I used to know, but the kind that comes from within. She left me for a richer man, and I let her go. When she came crawling back, I didn't slam the door in her face. I simply chose to keep it closed. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because some doors are meant to stay shut. And as I sat there, watching the stars emerge one by one, I realized something important. I wasn't just moving on from her, I was moving toward myself.